Usually when we look out a window or go for a walk, we just treat the greenery around us like a painted backdrop.
Oh, absolutely, like wallpaper.
Right, exactly. A tree is just a tree. A patch of grass is just grass. It's static, like a brick wall.
It's an easy illusion to fall for, honestly. We tend
Yes.
to view plants as, the quiet, motionless furniture of the earth.
Because they don't have faces.
Exactly. They don't have faces, they don't hunt like lions, so we naturally just assume nothing much is really happening out there.
But then if you actually peel back the layers of what's going on in the soil and in the stems and inside those leaves, suddenly that static wallpaper just vanishes.
Oh, yeah, completely.
Because we are looking at a high-stakes, ruthless, and incredibly complex manufacturing and distribution network.
It is the absolute definition of hidden drama. I mean, there is a constant, quiet battle for survival, for resources, and for legacy happening right beneath our feet.
And that is exactly what we are getting into today. So welcome to today's deep dive. Whether you're, brushing up on your biology or maybe working your way toward a GED, or you're just endlessly curious about how the natural world actually works, this deep dive is for you.
Yeah, we've got a really great stack of sources for this one.
We really do. We're looking at a fantastic explanatory essay on the plant life cycle, a tiered vocabulary list that goes from, everyday words right up to the complex academic science terms, and a set of worksheet questions that really test our understanding of these concepts.
Which is helpful because this stuff gets complicated fast.
It does. So our mission today is to unpack that hidden drama. Because the plant life cycle isn't just some passive slow motion thing. It's this dynamic repeating system that literally powers almost all life on this planet.
It's the engine of the world.
Right. So let's start at the logical beginning, the seed. Now, I have always looked at a seed as just like a dormant little pebble, just a dead fleck of matter until something magical happens.
And that is probably the single biggest misconception about plants. A seed is very much alive.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because looking at the science from the essay, the best analogy I can think of is that a seed is essentially a tiny, self-contained spaceship,
Oh, I like that.
or like an escape pod, right? It comes completely pre-packed. It has a tiny living young plant inside, and it has its own onboard food supply. So it is literally just sitting there waiting for the perfect landing environment to deploy.
That's a highly accurate way to visualize it, actually. And the scientific term for that deployment sequence on our vocab list is germination.
Germination.
Right. Germination is the physical process where the seed finally breaks its dormancy and begins to grow.
Yeah.
But to follow your escape pod analogy, it doesn't just open the doors the second it hits the ground.
Right. It waits.
Exactly. It requires very specific, non-negotiable triggers from its environment. We call these conditions.
I want to push on that for a second because I've always wondered about the extremes here. I was looking at worksheet question 15, and it asks, what happens if a student puts one group of seeds in warm, moist soil with air, and another group in perfectly warm soil with plenty of air, but it's just totally dry?
Yeah, the dry soil test.
Right. Will it do like a partial launch? Will it try to grow just a little bit with the resources it has?
Not a chance. The mechanism is entirely unforgiving.
Really, nothing at all.
Nothing. The conditions, which usually must include water, oxygen, and the proper temperature, have to be met simultaneously. If even one of those is missing, the pod stays locked.
Wow.
And logically, it has to be that way, If
Yeah.
the seed deployed its limited stored food in an environment without water, that young plant would immediately dry out and die. So the dormancy is a strict survival mechanism.
So how does a seed with no brain and like no nervous system actually know that the water is there? How does the door open?
It comes down to pure physics and biology. When the environment is finally wet enough, the seed coat absorbs that water. The water physically seeps into the seed, hydrating the dried tissues inside.
Okay.
And those tissues swell up, creating this immense internal hydraulic pressure. The young plant inside literally swells until it forces the hard outer shell to crack open.
It breaches the hull with water pressure.
Exactly.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
So the door is blown off. What comes out first?
Well, there's a very specific order of operations. The first thing that emerges is the root, and it always grows downward into the soil.
See, that seems counterintuitive to me. Why always the root first? I mean, if it needs sunlight to survive, why not send a shoot upward immediately to catch some rays?
Well, consider what happens if a storm rolls in.
Oh, right.
Yeah. The root has two critical jobs before the plant can even think about doing anything else.
Mm.
First, it has to anchor the entire operation so it doesn't wash away in the rain or, blow away in the wind.
It's tying itself down.
Precisely.
Hmm.
And second, it has to establish a supply line. It immediately starts absorbing water and vital nutrients from the soil. Only after that anchor and supply line are securely established does the plant send its shoot upward toward the sunlight.
Okay, so the transition here is wild to me. The spaceship has landed. The hydraulic pressure blew the doors open. The root is holding it down, and the shoot breaks through the soil.
Right.
So the plant has now officially entered the seedling stage. But it has a massive problem staring it in the face. It just used up all its packed lunches.
Yes, it did.
The stored food from the seed is entirely gone. How does a tiny, fragile seedling survive now?
It has to completely shift its operating model. It goes from living off its savings account to having to generate its own income on a daily basis.
Wow.
Yeah, it has to start making its own food.
And it has to do this without moving. So how exactly does it pull that off?
It builds a manufacturing plant. Specifically, it deploys its leaves, which act like organic solar panels. And this kicks off the process of photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis. That's one of the big tier 3 words, right?
Yes, a crucial one. Photosynthesis is the complex mechanism where plants capture energy from sunlight and use it to transform water and carbon dioxide into sugar.
So the sugar's the food.
Exactly. That sugar becomes the energy the plant burns to grow.
Okay, the solar panels are capturing the light, but what is the actual machinery doing the catching?
That would be chlorophyll.
Right, the green stuff.
Yeah, chlorophyll is the green substance inside the leaves, but it's much more than just a color. It acts as the chemical catalyst. It's the antenna that physically absorbs the solar energy.
I've never thought of it as an antenna before.
It totally is. And once it captures that sunlight, it uses the energy to essentially smash apart the water it pulled up from the roots and the carbon dioxide it pulled out of the air. It reassembles those molecules into sugar.
That is just brilliant.
It is. And, wonderfully for us, the leftover byproduct of this chemical reaction is oxygen, which it just releases back into the air.
So a seedling is essentially in a life or death race against time and the elements, right? I mean, it's tiny, just figured out how to manufacture its own food, and it has to get bigger fast to become what the essay calls a mature plant.
It is absolutely a race, and the odds are heavily stacked against it. The seedling stage is incredibly vulnerable. A sudden frost, a week without rain, or even just a hungry insect coming by for a snack can end the entire life cycle right there.
Just gone.
Just gone. So reaching the mature plant stage is a massive biological triumph.
What fundamentally changes when it crosses that finish line into maturity? What does being mature actually buy the plant?
Scale and resilience. The root system spreads much deeper and further into the earth, providing an unshakable anchor and a vast underground network to aggressively absorb water.
Right.
The stem becomes thicker and more rigid, so it's able to withstand heavy winds and carry more weight. And, crucially, it develops a much larger canopy of leaves.
Which means more solar panels.
Exactly. More leaves mean more solar panels, which means more photosynthesis, which generates more energy.
It's a compounding loop of power.
It really is. But here's the crucial part. All of this growth, all of this resilience, isn't just for the sake of getting bigger. Plants don't grow just to show off.
Right.
Maturity unlocks the plant's ultimate goal. Once it has secured enough surplus energy, it can finally afford to produce reproductive structures.
We're talking about flowers and cones.
Right. The entire brutal struggle to survive the seedling phase and reach maturity was just to get to the point where reproduction is biologically possible. It's all about ensuring the species continues.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. We've shifted the narrative from a plant just trying to survive the week to a plant trying to secure its legacy.
Exactly.
It is fully powered up, it has bloomed these beautiful flowers, but it hits a new logistical nightmare. It wants to combine its genetics with another plant, but it is physically cemented into the ground. It cannot walk over to its neighbor.
Which means it has to outsource the job.
Yes. It relies on nature's delivery drivers, the wind, water currents, birds, and of course insects. Bees are like the absolute rock stars of this delivery network.
They really are incredibly efficient couriers. But I want to pause here for a second, because when we talk about this process, there is a massive misconception that trips a lot of people up.
Oh, what's that?
People constantly confuse pollination with fertilization.
I will admit, I used to think they were the exact same thing. I mean, the bee lands on the flower, does its bee thing, and boom, a seed is made. Are they not the same step?
Not at all. They are two entirely distinct biological events. Pollination is simply the logistics.
Okay.
It is the physical movement of pollen from one flower to another flower of the same species.
Mhm.
Imagine a bee landing on a brightly colored petal to drink some nectar. While it's there, sticky pollen grains brush off the flower and cling to the bee's fuzzy body.
Right, like dust.
Yeah, exactly like dust. When that bee flies off and lands on the next flower, some of that pollen rubs off onto the new plant. That is pollination. The delivery has been successfully made.
The package is on the porch.
Exactly. But the package hasn't been open and the contents haven't been used. Fertilization only happens afterward, and it's a completely separate mechanical process.
So what is fertilization then?
Fertilization is the actual biological event where the male genetic material inside that tiny grain of pollen physically travels down into the flower and joins with the female part, the ovules, which contain the female cells.
Wait, so the pollen grain doesn't just sit on top of the flower, it has to travel inside.
Yes. The pollen grain literally has to grow a microscopic tube down through the tissues of the flower just to reach the ovule.
Wow, it grows a tube.
It does, and only when those two cells finally join does the formation of a brand new seed actually begin. So, the bee is just the mail carrier. It has absolutely no part in the seed making itself.
That is fascinating. The logistics network is completely separate from the manufacturing. And then, once fertilization is successful and the tiny new seeds are forming, the plant does something incredible to protect them. The flower, which has already done its job of attracting the bee, transforms. In many plants, it develops into a fruit.
Yes, that beautiful, fragrant flower drops its petals and the base of it swells up.
That detail blew my mind from the essay. The fruit we eat, like apples, oranges, berries, its entire biological purpose is just to be a protective vault for the seeds.
Right?
We are literally eating the plant's security system.
A protective vault, yes, but also a highly engineered vehicle for the next stage of the drama.
Right, because now the mature plant has successfully created its new seeds. The legacy is secure, mission accomplished, time to rest. Right.
Not quite.
Not quite at all. Because if those fruits just rot and drop the seeds straight down into the dirt directly below the parent plant, we have a catastrophic problem.
A completely fatal problem for those new seeds, honestly. They would suffocate.
So the spaceship has to be launched away from the mothership. The seeds need to escape. And this brings us to the concept of seed dispersal.
Which is a great topic.
I was looking into the different ways plants manage this escape, and one method absolutely stopped me in my tracks. I mean, wind makes sense, water makes sense. Animals eating the tasty fruit vault and, leaving the seeds somewhere else in their droppings, totally logical. But exploding seed pods.
It sounds like science fiction, doesn't it?
It sounds incredibly aggressive for a plant. How does a plant physically explode without muscles or gunpowder?
It's all about mechanical tension. As the seed pod matures, the different layers of tissue inside the pod begin to dry out at different rates.
Okay.
Because they dry unevenly, it creates a massive amount of physical stress, bending and pulling the pod out of shape. It's exactly like winding up a rubber band tighter and tighter.
Oh, man.
The tension builds until the pod simply cannot hold together anymore, and when the structure finally fails, it shatters violently, acting like a biological catapult that physically launches the seed's feet or even yards away through the air.
That is a staggering amount of effort just to throw some seeds. Why go to such explosive extremes?
To understand that, we have to look at the ruthless side of the hidden drama. It comes down to two academic vocab words from our list: compete and resources.
Right.
A plant needs sunlight, water, soil space, and nutrients to survive. There is only so much of that to go around in one patch of dirt. If a massive, mature tree drops thousands of its own seeds directly below its canopy, what happens to those seedlings?
They don't stand a chance. The mother tree's giant leaves are blocking out all the sunlight, and her massive, deep root network is drinking every drop of water in the soil.
Precisely. The young plants would be forced to compete with each other, and worse, they'd be fighting an unwinnable war against the fully established parent plant. They would all starve.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the parent plant uses the wind, waterways, animal digestion, or these mechanical explosions to fling those seeds as far away from its own territory as possible. Dispersal is the ultimate strategy to reduce overcrowding. It gives the new plant a fighting chance to find an open space with unclaimed resources.
It's rolling the dice, trying to find a fresh environment where the conditions are right. And if it works, if that dispersed seed lands in a fresh patch of soil, and the non-negotiable conditions of water, oxygen, and temperature are finally met again,
And then it starts?
the water seeps in, The hydraulic pressure builds. The hull breaches. The root goes down. The shoot goes up.
And the cycle begins again. This continuous, repeating pattern is the only reason plant life has persisted year after year, epoch after epoch.
And that officially closes the loop on the biological mechanics. We've gone from the tiny pressure-loaded escape pod to the solar-powered seedling, through the courier service of pollination and fertilization, and finally to the great escape of seed dispersal.
It's quite a journey.
But I want to zoom out now, because it's easy to look at this cycle and think, wow, what a neat bit of biology. But the stakes of this specific cycle are impossibly high.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this isn't just a story about a single plant surviving. This life cycle is the foundational system that keeps the entire natural world moving. They carry massive global responsibilities.
Let's talk about those responsibilities, because they really are the pillars of the Earth's ecosystem.
First and foremost, oxygen. Remember the byproduct of photosynthesis we talked about?
Right. Venting oxygen.
Exactly. The plant makes sugar for itself and vents oxygen as waste. Plants are literally the factories manufacturing the breathable air that humans and animals depend on minute by minute.
Which is incredibly easy to take for granted until you hold your breath.
Very much so. Secondly, they are the absolute base of the food chain. Think about how energy flows through living things. Every carnivore eats an herbivore, and every herbivore eats a plant.
Right.
But where did the plant get the energy? From the sun. Ultimately, the entire energy flow of almost every ecosystem on Earth starts with the sugar that a plant synthesized from raw sunlight.
And even beyond food and air, the physical structures of these mature plants are basically holding the world together. Their root systems grip the dirt, preventing soil erosion. Without them, the Earth's fertile topsoil would literally just wash away into the oceans every time it rained. Plus, they provide the raw materials for human survival. I mean, the active ingredients in countless medicines, the wood we use to build shelters, the cotton and fibers we weave into clothing.
It is the operating system of our planet. Without healthy, repeating plant life cycles, farms fail, forests shrink, and animal species struggle to survive. The microscopic biology of a single germinating seed is intimately tied to the macroscopic survival of the globe.
Which brings this whole conversation right back to you, the listener. Understanding this cycle isn't just about, passing a biology exam or getting a good grade on a GED science question. It is deeply practical, essential knowledge.
It really is.
Farmers rely on understanding the exact mechanics of pollination and conditions for germination to prevent crop failure and feed billions of people. Everyday gardeners use this knowledge to nurture microecosystems right in their own backyards. Scientists study these dispersal patterns and photosynthesis efficiencies to figure out how to protect the environment and improve food production as our global climate rapidly changes.
You really can't separate human progress from our understanding of this cycle.
It is genuinely incredible. We covered some serious ground today. We watched a tiny, dormant seed wait patiently for the absolute perfect conditions to violently breach its hull with hydraulic pressure.
Yep.
We saw it race against time, shifting from its packed lunch to deploying its chlorophyll solar panels so it could manufacture its own energy out of thin air and light. We decoded the vital difference between the pollination couriers dropping off the package and the actual biological fertilization of new life, which then gets protected inside a tasty fruit vault.
The security system.
Exactly. And finally, we saw the explosive lengths plants will go to, literally shattering themselves just to fling their offspring into new territory so the whole drama can start all over again. So what does this all actually mean for us?
Well, I think it means we need to fundamentally rethink our relationship with the natural world around us. Because plants are the base of the food chain and the primary producers of our oxygen, the energy flow of the entire world is tethered to this single repeating loop. So I want to leave you with this thought. Every single bite of food you will ever eat and every single breath of air you will ever take is the direct, unbroken result of a tiny seed that successfully waited for the perfect conditions to break open. We are entirely, utterly dependent on these silent solar-powered factories.
It really makes you look at that patch of grass or that tree outside your window a little differently, doesn't it? It's not just static wallpaper. It is the engine keeping us all alive. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.